The last class of organic compounds that I'm going to talk about is the nucleic acid. The nucleic acid is a large complex molecule. The function of the nucleic acid is to store information. And how it stores information is in a system of 4 compounds. I don't know how big of computer geeks any of you guys are, but basically if you've ever heard of binary, binary is a system of ones and zeros that computers use to store information. Nucleic acids are similar to that, but instead of using ones and zeros, there are 4 compounds that are used. Okay, so they're ready. All right, there are 2 nucleic acids that we're going to look at. There's DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. The shape is a double helix, which is basically a staircase that's twisted. The monomer of DNA DNA and RNA both is called a nucleotide. A nucleotide is composed of a sugar, a phosphate, and a base, which you see here in the little animation on the bottom. So the sugar is connected to the base on one side, like it usually goes sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate. I'll talk about that in a second. And then attached to the side of the sugar is the base, because this is going to form 1/2 of the DNA. So first thing, the sugar for DNA is called deoxyribose. Again, nope. Okay. Sorry about that. With the vocab, again, the suffix ose, if you think back to the first video on carbohydrates, I talked about glucose, fructose, galactose. Ose means sugar. Also maltose, sucrose, all of them. So ose means sugar. So we look at the full name of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and the sugar is deoxyribose. So this type of compound is called a nucleic acid, and we're describing which sugar is in the nucleotide. So we have a sugar, which is here, we have the phosphate, which is there, and the base, which is there. That whole thing is a nucleotide. You can see this up here as well. The nucleotide is the basis or the monomer of nucleic acid.
Here we have the famous DNA double helix. You can see the 2 helical strands that are intertwined and wind around each other on the outside of the molecule. This is the material that stores all of our genetic information. In higher life forms, this will be the equivalent of something like a gigabyte of information stored in the molecules that form the individual chromosomes, all packed within the nucleus, which is a tiny fraction of the entire cell size. So what does DNA do? Well, the information in DNA ends up providing the information for sequencing the amino acids to make proteins. We have information in a 1-dimensional form that provides the information for a 3-dimensional form.
Let's take a closer look at DNA. Here you can see that each strand of a DNA molecule is a long chain of subunits. These subunits are called nucleotides. This close-up diagram shows that a nucleotide is made up of 3 parts: a sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogen base. In DNA, the sugar is deoxyribose.
Okay, so before I go to RNA, I just want to, I'm gonna go back to a blank screen. All right, I just want to, oh no, I can't do that one. Here we go. Emphasize how the nucleotide is built to form a DNA molecule. So first thing I have is I've got my sugar. I'm just gonna make it like that. And then attached to the sugar is the phosphate. So the backbone of the DNA molecule goes sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, whatever. It's alternating on the sides of the DNA molecule. And then attached here is the base. So if on the other side we have the same thing, I'll do my phosphates first, and then those are attached to my sugar. Attaches there, attaches there. Told you about my drawing skills. And then I've got my base here. And what happens is between the bases on one side and the bases on the other side, you have a hydrogen bond that's formed. And so you take that and you twist it and you get your double helix, which you see here. Okay, so sugar, phosphate, and then attached to the sugars are the bases, and the bases have hydrogen bonds between them. And I'll explain why all of that is a structure the way it is in like a much later chapter. Okay, the second nucleic acid is called ribonucleic acid. It is a single strand, unlike DNA, which is a double strand. And the sugar here is ribose. Again, ose meaning sugar and ribose meaning ribonucleic acid. So the difference between DNA and RNA is here. We have a single strand of RNA, a double strand of DNA. Remember I said that nucleic acid uses a system of 4 compounds. These are the 4 compounds that you see. You'll learn much more about them later, but 3 of the 4 compounds are the same for both DNA and RNA. We have cytosine, we have guanine, we have adenine. These are the bases, by the way. But when it comes to the 4th base, RNA and DNA are different. For RNA, it uses a compound called uracil, and for DNA, it uses a compound called thymine. Ooh.
The instructions in DNA are carried out with the help of RNA. Here you can see a DNA molecule and an RNA molecule. Notice that RNA differs from DNA in 3 ways. First, an RNA molecule has only 1 strand of nucleotides. Second, RNA contains ribose instead of deoxyribose. Third, RNA has the nitrogen base uracil instead of thymine.